The silence of deep space had always been comforting to Captain Lila Ward. It was the kind of silence that allowed her to focus, to strategize. But now, that silence had turned oppressive. Every hum of the ship's engine, every flicker of a light panel, seemed unnervingly loud in the sterile corridors of the Erebus, their long-haul exploratory vessel. They were 6 weeks out from their nearest base, deep in uncharted territory. The mission was straightforward. Survey an anomaly detected by long-range probes, a strange gravitational field with no discernible source. The crew of 5 was eager to uncover something new. "Captain, you need to see this," said Dr. Ethan Carter, the ship's astrophysicist. His voice cracked over the intercom, filled with unease. Lila hurried to the observation deck, where Carter and the rest of the crew had gathered. A massive, shimmering sphere hovered in the void outside. It pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat, its edges fracturing the surrounding space into kaleidoscopic distortions. "What is it?" she asked, her voice steady despite the rising dread. "It's impossible," Carter stammered. "No mass, no heat signature. It's like a void, but it's emitting gravitational waves. We've never seen anything like this." Lila glanced at the others. First Officer Reyes, stoic and calm, Engineer Priya, who clutched her tablet tightly, and Medic Danvers, whose usual confidence seemed shaken. "We log it, analyze it, and proceed cautiously," Lila said firmly. "No one does anything without my authorization." But the anomaly had other plans. It started small. Power surges flickered through the ship. Instruments began glitching, giving contradictory readings. Then came the sound, an unearthly, low-frequency hum that resonated deep in their bones. That night, Lila woke to a scream. Racing to the engineering bay, she found Priya lying on the floor, blood pooling around her head. The air reeked of burnt circuits, and her console was a shattered mess. "She said something was watching her," Danvers whispered, his face pale as he examined the body. "She wouldn't say what." Before Lila could respond, the ship shuddered violently. Alarms blared, lights strobed. Carter's voice echoed over the intercom. "Captain, the anomaly! It's pulling us in!" The next moments were chaos. Lila barely made it to the cockpit as the Erebus was engulfed by the sphere. The ship twisted, stretched, and then nothing. Lila woke up, gasping. She was in her bunk, her heart pounding. Sunlight streamed through the tiny window, a view of distant stars she knew too well. But something was wrong. The date on her console read 6 days earlier. The door slid open, and Priya stepped in, alive and smiling. "Captain, you've got to see this anomaly. It's incredible." Lila froze, her blood running cold. She'd been here before. Lila stared at Priya, her words replaying like an echo in her mind. "You've got to see this anomaly. It's incredible." Her heart pounded as she followed the engineer to the observation deck, where the rest of the crew had gathered, just as before. The sphere hung outside, pulsing faintly, its strange glow bending reality itself. "This isn't possible," Lila muttered under her breath. "Captain?" Reyes asked, raising an eyebrow. "Something wrong?" She forced a smile. "No, just a headache. Let's proceed with caution." But her mind raced. She remembered Priya's death, the alarms, the feeling of the ship being torn apart. She knew this wasn't a dream. It was real. But somehow, the timeline had reset. She tried to ignore the gnawing unease as Carter began explaining the anomaly again. It was identical to the first time. His words, his tone, even the way he nervously adjusted his glasses. By the time the meeting ended, Lila felt trapped in a waking nightmare. She needed to test her theory. Later, in engineering, she confronted Priya. "You need to stay away from the console tonight." Priya frowned. "What are you talking about? I've run diagnostics 1,000 times. It's fine." "No," Lila insisted, grabbing her arm. "Promise me, don't touch it." Priya pulled back, her expression turning wary. "Captain, are you okay? You're acting strange." Lila didn't blame her. How could she explain what she didn't understand herself? She didn't push further, but unease settled in her chest like a lead weight. That night, she stayed awake, pacing her quarters. Hours passed, and the silence stretched until the scream. She bolted to the engineering bay, her worst fears realized. Priya lay lifeless on the floor, blood pooling beneath her head. The console sparked, a flicker of orange light against the cold steel walls. Lila staggered back, bile rising in her throat. It didn't matter. I couldn't stop it. As the ship began to shudder again, the alarms blared, and the same voice crackled over the intercom. "Captain, the anomaly! It's pulling us in!" This time, she didn't run to the cockpit. What was the point? The ship twisted, stretched, and then nothing. Lila woke up gasping, the same stars outside her window. Her console read the same date, 6 days earlier. Her door slid open. Priya walked in, smiling. "Captain, you've got to see this anomaly. It's incredible." "No," Lila whispered, trembling. Priya frowned. "What?" Lila didn't respond. She felt the weight of the loop pressing down on her. "I'm trapped. We're all trapped." This time, she didn't go to the observation deck. Instead, she locked herself in her quarters, her mind racing. How many times had this happened? How many times had she failed to stop it? Her console buzzed. A message appeared on the screen, one she hadn't seen before. "You cannot escape." Lila stared at the message on her console, her breath caught in her throat. The words glowed faintly, stark against the dark background. "You cannot escape." Her hands trembled as she reached for the console, but before she could type a response, the text vanished. The screen reverted to its normal status, calm, unassuming, as if mocking her. She leaned back, her pulse racing. Who sent that message? Was it the anomaly? Or something else? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of knuckles rapping against her door. "Captain?" It was Reyes, his voice steady but tinged with concern. "What is it?" she asked, masking her unease. "You didn't come to the observation deck. The crew's worried about you." He paused. "Priya mentioned something about you acting strange." Lila opened the door, her face hard. "I need to tell you something, and you're not going to believe it." Reyes crossed his arms. "Try me." She explained everything. Priya's death, the anomaly pulling them in, the resets. As she spoke, Reyes's expression shifted from skepticism to discomfort. "That's a lot to take in," he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. "But let's say you're right. How do we stop it?" "I don't know," she admitted. "Every time I try to change something, it doesn't matter. The same events happen. It's like the ship, no, the anomaly, wants it this way." Reyes frowned. "So we're puppets in some sick game?" Before Lila could respond, the ship's lights flickered, plunging them into darkness. That low, bone-rattling hum returned, louder this time. It seemed to vibrate through the walls, through their bodies. The emergency lights snapped on, bathing the corridor in an eerie red glow. Over the intercom, Carter's panicked voice crackled. "Captain, something's wrong with the anomaly. It's—" The line cut off, replaced by static. Lila bolted toward the observation deck, Reyes on her heels. When they arrived, they found Carter standing frozen, staring out the viewport. "What's happening?" Lila demanded. Carter turned slowly, his face pale. It's changing. The sphere outside had shifted. Its surface writhed and pulsed, no longer smooth but covered in jagged, swirling patterns. It felt alive, malevolent. "I think it knows we're watching," Carter whispered. Lila's stomach churned. "We need to figure this out before it's too late. Reyes, come with me. Carter, monitor the anomaly but don't touch anything." Back in the engineering bay, Lila accessed the ship's logs. She searched for anomalies in their system, anything that might explain the resets. That's when she noticed it. A file buried deep in the archives, one that hadn't been there before. It was labeled Iteration 43. "What the hell is this?" she muttered, opening the file. Inside was a single video clip. The timestamp was from 6 hours in the future. The footage showed the engineering bay, the console sparking. Smoke filled the air. In the center of the frame was her, lying motionless on the floor, her eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. She recoiled, bile rising in her throat. "This can't be real." Reyes leaned over her shoulder, his face grim. "It hasn't happened yet, but it will." A new message appeared on the console, this time in bold letters. "You are not the first." Lila's breath hitched as she stared at the new message. "You are not the first." Her mind churned with questions. Not the first? Does that mean others have been caught in this? Other crews? Other ships? Reyes broke the silence. "What does it mean? Not the first. What?" She shook her head, unable to answer. The message seemed to confirm her deepest fear, that the anomaly wasn't just an accidental discovery. It was a trap, a machine, or perhaps something alive, designed to ensnare them. Her console buzzed again. Another file appeared. Iteration 27. Reyes clicked on it before Lila could stop him. A second video played. This time, it was the observation deck. The anomaly outside was smaller, less volatile. In the footage, Carter and Danvers stood arguing, their voices muffled. Suddenly, the viewport shattered inward, sucking them into the void. The clip ended abruptly, leaving only static. "Jesus Christ!" Reyes muttered, stepping back. Lila swallowed hard. It's not just replaying events. The resets. They're different. Each iteration changes. Reyes clenched his fists. Then why keep showing us this? Why let us remember? The lights flickered again, plunging them into a brief but suffocating darkness. That hum returned, louder than before, reverberating deep in their chests. Lila grabbed the edge of the console to steady herself as a faint voice echoed through the ship. It was distorted, crackling but unmistakable. "Help! Me!" Lila and Reyes exchanged a look. "That came from the medbay," she said, her voice taut. They sprinted down the corridor, their footsteps echoing ominously. As they approached the medbay, the hum intensified, becoming a grating roar that seemed to claw at their minds. When they stepped inside, they froze. Danvers was there, his back to them, hunched over a body on one of the medbeds. The air was thick with the metallic tang of blood. "Danvers!" Lila called cautiously. He didn't respond. She stepped closer, her heart pounding. When she finally saw the body, her stomach turned. It was him. Danvers was dissecting his own corpse, his hands trembling as he worked. "Danvers, stop!" Reyes barked, pulling him back. Danvers turned to face them, his eyes hollow and glazed. "I need to know," he rasped. "It won't let us leave unless we understand." "Understand what?" Lila demanded, shaking him. Danvers blinked slowly, as if waking from a trance. "The resets. The anomaly. It's not random. It's testing us." "Testing us for what?" Reyes asked, his voice rising. Danvers let out a strangled laugh, tears streaming down his face. "Survival? Or maybe something worse?" Before they could press him further, the medbay doors slammed shut. The lights dimmed, leaving them in near darkness. The hum reached a deafening crescendo. Then came the voice again, clearer this time. "You will all fail." The lights snapped back on, and Danvers was gone. "What the hell just happened?" Reyes whispered, scanning the room. Lila shook her head, her hands trembling. "It's playing with us, testing us, like he said. But for what purpose?" A new message flashed on her wrist communicator. Iteration 44. Begin. Her blood ran cold. "We're starting over again." Lila's stomach churned as the words on her wrist communicator burned into her mind. Iteration 44. Begin. She blinked, and the world around her shifted. She was back in her quarters, the same sterile walls, the same faint hum of the ship's systems. Her breathing quickened as she looked at her console. 6 days earlier, the exact same timestamp. Her door slid open, and Priya stepped in, smiling. "Captain, you've got to see this anomaly. It's incredible." Lila didn't respond. She knew the words by heart. The monotony of the loop was suffocating, but the stakes grew higher with each reset. This wasn't just a trap. It was a crucible, and something was watching them. This time she didn't follow Priya. Instead, she stormed out of her quarters and headed straight for the engineering bay. She needed answers, and the mysterious files hidden in the ship's logs were her only lead. Reyes found her hunched over the console, furiously typing. "You're diving into this again?" he asked, stepping into the room. She didn't look up. "We don't have a choice. Whatever this anomaly is, it's forcing us to play its game. But I think we've left breadcrumbs for ourselves. Messages, clues in the logs." "What do you mean?" She pulled up another hidden file, this one labeled Iteration 19. The video showed Carter alone in the cockpit, speaking into the ship's recorder. "If you're watching this, it means we failed again," his recorded voice said, trembling. "The anomaly. It's not just a phenomenon. It's alive. It's been studying us, breaking us, and..." He paused, glancing over his shoulder. "We think it's trying to find the perfect version of us, something that can survive its test. But no matter what we do, someone always dies. Every single time." The clip ended abruptly. Reyes exhaled sharply. "Perfect version? What does that even mean? We're just people." "Not to it," Lila said, her voice grim. "To the anomaly. We're pieces on a board. It's tweaking the game, making adjustments to see what works." Reyes rubbed his temples. "And if we don't figure out how to play along, we'll be stuck here forever." That night, Lila gathered the crew in the mess hall. She couldn't keep them in the dark anymore. "Listen carefully," she began, her tone firm. "We're caught in a time loop. The anomaly outside isn't just a cosmic fluke. It's a predator, and we're its prey. Every time we fail, it resets the loop and makes us start over." The room fell silent. Carter looked skeptical, Priya anxious, and Danvers downright terrified. "Prove it," Carter said, crossing his arms. Lila nodded. "Tomorrow, Priya will die in the engineering bay. Carter, the anomaly will pull the ship in again, and we'll all be torn apart. After that, we'll wake up back here, 6 days earlier." The words hung heavy in the air. "If you already know all this, why haven't you stopped it?" Priya asked, her voice shaking. "Because every time I try, it adapts," Lila admitted. "The loop isn't just a reset, it's a test, and we're failing." Danvers stared at her, his face pale. "So what happens if we pass?" "I don't know," she said quietly. "But if we don't figure it out, we'll keep dying until we go mad, or worse." The lights flickered again, and the low hum returned, deep and resonant. Lila felt the air grow colder. the hum now accompanied by a faint whisper. This time, she could almost make out the words, "You are close, but not enough." "What the hell was that?" Priya whispered, her eyes darting around the room. "It's watching us," Lila said, "and it's not going to stop." A message flashed on the wall panel, written in jagged, flickering text. "Iteration 44. Complete the sequence." "What sequence?" Reyes asked, his voice tight with fear. Lila stared at the screen, her mind racing. "We're missing something. There's a pattern here, a code we haven't cracked yet. And if we don't solve it in time—" The ship shuddered violently, as if answering her unspoken thought. "We'll reset again," she finished, her voice barely a whisper. The ship shuddered again, the hum of the anomaly now vibrating through the walls. Lila's eyes narrowed at the console. The message had changed. Iteration 44. Complete the sequence. "What sequence?" Carter's voice was thick with disbelief. "It's a puzzle," Lila said, her voice tight with frustration. "We've been getting pieces each time, clues hidden in the system. If we don't figure it out, it will reset again." Reyes leaned over the console, his face pale. "I've found something. It's a frequency, but it's not ours." Priya scrolled through the data. "It's from the anomaly itself, hidden in the system's files." Lila's heart raced as the frequency synced with the ship's systems. "It's asking us to align the ship with it. We need to follow these instructions, or it'll keep resetting us." The walls groaned as if the ship itself were resisting. "We don't have a choice," Lila said. "We do it now, or we die again." Back in the engineering bay, Priya worked quickly, her fingers flying over the console. The ship trembled, the voices in the air growing louder. "Do it now," they whispered. Priya hit the final key. The ship lurched and the screens flashed. Iteration 44. Sequence initiated. The room fell silent, the hum fading. But the tension in the air remained thick. The anomaly outside shimmered with new intensity. Lila stood at the observation deck, her crew behind her, tense but determined. "We're close," she said. "If we don't face this now, the loop will trap us forever." Carter shot her a look. "You don't know if this will work." Lila turned to face him. "Number. But I can't keep dying like this." Priya stepped forward. "I'll follow you. Whatever happens." Reyes nodded. "Me too." Lila took a deep breath. "Then we go." The shuttle's engines roared to life as they approached the anomaly. The world outside warped, the universe breaking apart in brilliant, chaotic patterns. For a moment, Lila felt as if her very being was unraveling. But she held firm. Suddenly, the world fell still. The shuttle passed through the anomaly's boundary, and the crew found themselves in an empty void. A figure emerged, shifting and strange. It spoke, its voice a pulse in their minds. "You have completed the test. Now, the choice is yours. Evolve or remain trapped." "What does that mean?" Lila asked, her voice trembling. The figure faded. The crew stood in the void, each lost in their own thoughts. The warmth surrounding them grew intense. Lila turned to her crew. "We can't go back. This is it." One by one they stepped forward, the warmth enveloping them. Lila felt her mind and body changing, the fear melting away as clarity took its place. When she opened her eyes again, she was back on the ship, the anomaly gone. The hum was silent, but something had shifted. The loop was broken, the future uncertain. "What now?" Reyes asked. Lila looked at her crew, a small, determined smile crossing her face. "Now, we find out what we've become."